Okay, good afternoon or good morning, depending on what coast you are on. It's Monday, July 27th at 1 o'clock Eastern, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Gil Rogers, Director of Enrollment Insights at Chegg. We are one of the sponsors of Higher Ed Live and are very happy to be here. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in the industry. Today was one of the most important, so thank you for joining us. All episodes of Admissions Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Admissions Live, as I mentioned before, is made possible by Chegg Enrollment Services. We provide services for students from college search through career and help colleges and universities find their best fit match. Higher Ed Live is produced by mStoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Join mStoner on August 12th for their latest webinar, A Tale of Two Ink Densities. Those big words, Michael. Understanding the details of the print process. If you're a marketing and communication professional responsible for creating or influencing print communications, you won't want to miss this session. We're tweeting out a link where you can learn more and register. And for today's presentation, I'd like to welcome Michael Stoner for today's show. Michael is a co-founder and the president of mStoner, has served hundreds of educational institutions, nonprofits, and businesses on 4 continents. He's spoken at numerous conferences, written about online and offline marketing for higher ed, trade, and association media, and has blogged at mstoner.com since 2003. He co-edits a blog about higher ed marketing, branding, and communications on Inside Higher Ed. So welcome, Michael.
Hey, Gil, thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, today's show is all about, demystifying admissions or debunking admissions myths. To give everyone a little bit of a background, could you kind of share with us the genesis of this study and some of the recent work that we've released?
Sure. It's really a tribute to you that this study got going because you have done such great work, and Chegg has done such great work in identifying what prospective students, mostly teens, use in their college search and choice process in terms of the web and social media and the kinds of devices they use. And I guess you came up with the idea about looking at we came up with the idea together looking at what college admission officers and enrollment, people in enrollment management understand about what teens do and where there's alignment and misalignment in their knowledge of teen behavior and how they do their college search and what kind of tools they rely on and how they use websites and social media and that sort of thing. So we relied on a lot of the research you've done with teens for the teen portion and adapted questions for enrollment and admission. We mounted a survey in June, and by the end of June we had results from that survey. And I was fortunate enough to present with you at the ACT conference, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess, in Chicago. So this research is fairly new, and we're pretty excited about it. And we're working on a white paper that we'll release sometime in the near future. I'd like to say not too distant future, but you know how these things go.
I think the most important thing that you mentioned there is the spotlight on the alignment and the misalignment. I think to your point, Chegg does a lot of research throughout the year on here's what teams are telling us and here are the things that they say that they're using. And there are studies out there, Journal or NACAC's Data College Admissions Report, and I'm sure there's surveys throughout the industry on how we're spending our money in admissions offices or how we're allocating our time and our resources. But I don't think anybody's really done a deep dive into, okay, here are the 5 to 8 main statements that we see as true in the enrollment field, and does the field as a whole feel that way, or is it just a subset? And then how is that aligned with what students are saying and their behavior? So it's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, I did some research on this, and I could find two studies within, I'd say, about the past 5 or 6 years. One of them was published in the Journal of College Admission in about 2009, And another one was done for a master's thesis in about 2010, I think. But that's basically the only research that I could find that kind of looked at the student use and student viewpoint and the college admission professional viewpoint, and looked at alignments and misalignments. And I guess what interests me, and I think you too about this, is it's not so much a gotcha, but the better informed somebody in an admission office is these days about what's really important to prospective students, the more effectively they can target their admissions materials and be aware of, have a higher alignment with impact on prospective students.
Great. Yeah, so I think for today's conversation, I think what might be good is if we go through some of the main kind of high-level theme statements. So I'll throw them at you, and then if you want to share a little bit of the admissions officer perspectives, then I can kind of speak as the Chegg student voice. I mean, I'm surrounded by orange and white, so I'm pretty well branded here in the background.
Yeah,
so I will I'll share those perspectives. So I think the first one that I know we settled on and came up with was the idea that prospects hang on our every word. And, as admissions officer, as a former admissions officer myself, I like to believe that speaking to prospective students, I have a huge impact on their decision to ultimately apply and enroll at the school. So when we asked admissions directors, what they thought, what were some of those findings?
Mm-hmm. Well, admission directors and enrollment people generally believe that teens really think that a conversation with an admission officer is important. Before deciding to apply, 71% said it was really important. After deciding to apply, 79% said it was important. After applying, 77% said it was important. And after being accepted, 72% said it was important. So you can see along the spectrum of choice to decision to application, and after being accepted, college admission officers generally think that it's really important for prospective students to talk with them, and that it plays a key role. Those kinds of conversations play a key role in the decision that prospective students are making about their institution.
Yeah, and I think some of that's a little self-affirming, right? If you think about, that's my job. My job is to talk to students, so it must be important, right?
That's right.
What's interesting, and I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on where this disconnect might be, is from the Chegg student findings, and we did surveys throughout the year, and we do surveys throughout the year on various topics, but overall each year we survey over 10,000 students across multiple studies. And we found that this year about 45% of teens said that they valued conversation with admissions offices. So it's nearly half, but it's less than half. And I think that other interesting findings were 75% said college fairs are not that influential in deciding where to apply. 2/3 of students said that college reps visiting their school were not that influential. So I know I have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on where this disconnect is between the admissions officer believing that the conversations they're having are impactful throughout the entire process, and teens not necessarily being too warm to the fact that, or too warm to those types of assumptions.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, first of all, that it's not that these conversations don't have any effect. But it's that teens are paying attention to many other different sources of information, and relative to those sources of information, conversations with college admission officers or what college admission officers say aren't that important to them. And so, their parents, what their parents have to say, what their friends have to say, what they find in social media, all these are sources of information that they probably value more. You know the specifics about that, but I know when I talk to prospective students, when we do work with clients, or when I have conversations with prospective students, there are other sources of information that they place more weight in than admission officers. And so I think that's just a fact of the reality that they're looking at lots of different kinds of information and weighing them according to value. And on that scale, conversations with admission officers don't rank very highly.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add to that from my perspective as a former admissions officer is, when you look at the things that students do value, the campus tour, meeting tour guides, presentations on campus, those are the types of things that admissions officers tend to be the conduit to get to. They facilitate those things on the events on campus. They introduce the student to other students when they're on campus. So as an admissions counselor, I think there's some benefit of that. Of you're not necessarily a salesperson per se for your campus, which many may feel, but you're more so a true counselor or a coordinator for that student's experience. So it's just, as an admissions officer, really thinking about where your role is in that student experience and realizing that they're looking at the student perspectives, they're looking at the niches or college prowlers of the world, they're looking at social media. You're there to help them find the official information, help them to navigate the process, and I feel like through those actions, by being helpful, you'll influence a student's decision to apply and enroll.
In some ways, what you're describing is you as an admission counselor are a node in a network, and your role as a node in that network is to make sure that a student gets connected to the other points in that network that are most valuable and important to them.
Exactly. Good thoughts. So the next one, and I find this one interesting. Again, coming from the admissions world, every year we get so hung up or so caught in the hype of U.S. News rankings and all of the top lists and top this, top that. So the general statement that we made, or that we assume, is that the higher your institution's ranking, the more impressed teens are. So from the admissions officer side, what were the reports there from the deans and directors?
Well, given how much institutions hype change in the U.S. News ranking, you'd think it would be one of the most important things anybody would ever care about. And in fact, admission officers, 72% of them said that it was important to teens before they apply. However, after they've decided to apply, after applying and after being accepted, it wasn't very important. So 11% of admissions and enrollment officers who responded to the survey said it was valuable to teens after they were accepted.
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting part of the conversation, because you're right. There's always the hype of, and I tweet about this every year that the U.S. News ranking comes out. It's, if you're not ranked in the top 100, rankings don't matter. They're not a clear indicator of the campus community. They're not a clear indicator of opportunities, yada, yada, yada. The minute you get to 100 or 99, your attitude changes, and it's,
bingo.
We're in the top 100. We're the greatest program. Check us out. Put it on the view book. Put it on the website. Put it on the visitor center. And the belief is that that's going to drive more applications and drive more interest, which then feeds the beast, because then you have more. Then you feel like you have more applications. Your selectivity goes up, and then your ranking goes up. What's interesting from the student perspectives, and this came from a couple of different studies, our social admissions report, and our Chegg student panel, which is our students that we survey throughout the year on a variety of topics. Only 16% of students indicated rankings were extremely useful or when researching colleges, which is essentially opposite of what the directors and deans said, because 77% said that the rankings were influential when deciding where to enroll. So it feels like, and I was quoted in the Chronicle after our session about this at the ACT conference, it feels like there's a disconnect here, or we're using rankings on the wrong side of the process. I think one of the things we had a great conversation around, and I'd love your thoughts on this piece too, in the room at ACT, was at the end of that cycle, why would rankings peak in importance? Is it quality of the academics trumps all at the end? Is it justifying the decision to their friends? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think it plays. This is a way to me of teens saying that it helps them to narrow their choices, because in the beginning of the process, I was talking to somebody yesterday who recounted applying to 20 colleges, 20 universities, And so if you apply to that many institutions, it's basically a shotgun approach. Hopkins, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Duke, Stanford, all the top choices. Then when you get accepted, then you're starting to winnow that pool down considerably and ask yourself some hard questions. And one of the hard questions is, okay, if I go here rather than there, what's the rating of that institution? What's the benefit to me when I graduate? What are my friends going to say if I tell them I'm going to institution A rather than institution B? How's it rated? So that becomes part of the decision, one of the factors that students are using to make a decision.
Interesting. That's probably, out of all of our findings, one of the areas that's going to be the biggest points of contention with folks, because it's a mindset difference on the admissions side that, oh, the ranking is important at the front. Now, that huge caveat, we don't have any data to substantiate this at all, but parents, I feel like, are likely more influenced at that beginning of the process by the rankings, because it helps, to formulate the list of I'll say recommended schools that they tell their students to look at. They're gonna that might be different. No.
Yeah. No. I think that's right. And also we can't ignore the fact that many students go into their college search and choice process with a predetermined list of colleges that they're going to consider first, and that list is built from brand perceptions, from contact they've had from friends, siblings who attend those institutions, for what they see on institutions' Instagram feeds. Who knows how that list is built, but rankings may have an effect there that they don't quite understand.
Great.
Because they're dealing with siblings, maybe, or friends who decided to go to one institution rather than another, and rankings may have played a big role in that decision.
Great. So you mentioned schools' Instagram feeds. That's actually the next point that we called out was the statement of social media is an awesome channel for engaging teens who don't know our institution. So what are the admissions director's thoughts on that?
Well, in response to this, to the question that we asked about channels that were influential, Gil, we asked about email, phone calls, social media, brochures, pamphlets, text messages, virtual events. So we asked them to look at those options and tell us which they thought were significant. And in fact, social media ranked first out of those choices at 30%. And I should tell you that pamphlets ranked second at 21% for institutions that students had never heard of. So in that list, social media was first. And what did students say? This is an interesting response, isn't it?
Yeah, and I want to come back to that point on pamphlets versus social in a minute, but what students said, it was very interesting, and quite honestly not really that shocking. Half of them use official social media for colleges they've applied to, which is mid to bottom half of the funnel of a recruitment process with a student. Only 4% of students told us that they prefer social media as the first point of contact. They're using official social media for information, as an information source to inform their decisions, so it's more of a yield-based activity. But when they do that, they're still not necessarily connecting with the school directly. They're also connecting with current students, not with the admissions department. Mm-hmm. And additionally, 70% of students say that conversations that they had on social media influenced their decision where to enroll. And we've got these slides we can send around if you'd like them to see the side-by-side data comparisons. But it's really night and day from research phase to decide phase. 10% of students said they use Facebook when researching colleges. 33% said when deciding where to enroll. 4% for Twitter. 15% on decide to enroll. So there's just huge jumps from the research side to the decision engine side. But I want to take a step back though and think about, and this will go to one of our points about college board search and name buys and what have you. But you said that 30% of admissions directors said that social media was a great way to introduce themselves or to connect to students that had never heard of them before. But only 12% said brochures, 21% said pamphlets, which I kind of put those in the same similar bucket, which means that less than a quarter are using the things that we're investing a lot of time and money in. So I wonder what your thoughts are there with, just digital versus print strategy for, traditional outreach.
One of the things that significant
We are live, so hold on one second. We're going to try to get Michael back.
Am I still here? Gil, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
There you go. It's a live show. We're all good. Live and in living color.
Okay. So I don't know where we stopped, but you asked about the impact of print.
Yep.
And my sense is from institutions that we work with and work that we've done is that yes, print is still effective, but it's more as a way to bring people to social channels and websites than just having a big impact in and of itself the way it may have a generation ago.
Yeah, so I think the lesson here then from the responses is maybe the market is starting to feel that way too, from introducing themselves to students that have never heard of them before, with those numbers being so low on the director study. So that from my perspective is a positive that we're thinking more middle of the funnel with our communications than not. Great. So the next one is this goes into a really hot topic having to do with mobile. Admissions officers don't understand how teens use their phone.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about this when you look at college and university websites and see. I tried to track this down for our presentation, and couldn't find numbers about it. But my guess is that probably 50% of college and university websites are responsive and 50% aren't. So, little bit hard to say. I don't know anybody who's actually done that research and collected those numbers. So 73% of admission professionals said that teens primarily use smartphones to research colleges. So that's a really high number, 73%.
Yeah, and that's interesting that 3/4 essentially believe that students do, and yet half of college websites, let's be fair, about half, maybe more, maybe less, are not mobile friendly. So there's a disconnection, I think, in perception of what students are doing and even actions with strategy.
And actions with strategy, yeah. And we hear a lot from prospective clients and clients about the need to be mobile friendly. And to be fair, in order to build a really great mobile friendly website, it takes time and work. So it's just not something you can snap your fingers and do. And if your website isn't responsive, there are difficult choices to be made about how to get it there.
Great. And summing up the student and school comparisons, and again, we can send all of these, or you can download them from the article on Chronicle of Higher Ed. There's pretty interesting comparisons we make between what admissions officers said and what teens said with regards to their use of mobile devices for various activities. I know one of them where there was pretty good alignment was visiting a college website using a mobile browser, which close to 90% of admissions officers believe that students have done that. About 8 out of 10 teens said they did that, so those numbers are pretty close together. But there's some disconnects in other activities. I wonder if you could talk about some of those misalignments, and we can maybe talk about why.
Yeah, for example, one misalignment is that college reps, 65% of college reps said that students texted with a college rep, and 14% of teens said that they've done that. Another one is that 74% of admission officers said that teens ask questions on social media, the official social media accounts, and 13% of teens said that they've actually done that. And 73% of college reps said that teens took a virtual tour on a mobile device, and only a third of teens said that they've actually done that.
Yeah, and I think I feel like there's two main drivers of this. One is privacy, right? I think that there's
Right. Yep.
a desire to have, the gated community of their messaging apps. You think about all the different messaging apps that a student can use. They use them for different things, and then the other is, ease of use. I think,
Right. Yep.
I think admissions officers believe that students are doing all these activities on their mobile devices, but because half of the websites are not mobile friendly, the students aren't doing those things because they can't, or it's because it's too challenging to do.
Right.
So I think, if you just look at the numbers back and forth, it says, oh, students aren't using their mobile device for any of these things, and that's not I don't believe that's the case. I think they're not doing it because they can't, and
Right.
if given the ability to, I think things like messaging and social media on a mobile device are still gated, separate. They're going to talk to other students, not use the official channels.
Right.
But the other areas, like taking a college tour or taking a virtual tour, possibly, submitting an application, maybe not, depending on how much of an essay they can write with their thumbs. But there's other things that they could do on a mobile device that they just don't.
Yeah, and I think also there's a piece of it too that we need to remember is that teens don't like to be marketed to.
Mm-hmm.
So if they think that their action is going to result in you contacting them or marketing to them, they want to be sure that they're interested in your institution before they actually take that action. So if they've decided that they want to attend your institution, then they're willing to engage in social media. But up until that point, no.
Yeah, and one of the and we'll talk about this a little bit after this next point, but one of the questions that was asked in our presentation at ACT was, well, then what is the best strategy for finding students and engaging them throughout the process? And I think, it's focus on students with a demonstrated interest, so inbound inquiries to your website, students who do come to talk to you at a college fair. Those are the students who are new. Those are the students who you're going to be able to engage through the process. Students who are inquiring with you online, saying that they're interested in your school, and then doing, strategic outreach to students in populations that you're trying to build. So you're focusing those name buys a lot more strategically, and then, using social at that bottom of the funnel as an engagement component. If you're using social to branch out and try to bring in new inquiries, you're misaligned with where it's most impactful in your process.
Yep.
And on that point, so the next finding that we came to, and there were some laughs in the room when we said it, because our general statement was search works, really. And when we say search, we're speaking to name by search, not Google search. So the general statement, search works, really. How did admissions officers agree or disagree with that?
Well, admission officers really believe that communications from colleges that teens hadn't previously heard of will have some influence in their decision to apply to those colleges. So, in fact, 73% said it will have some effect, and 23% said it will have a big effect.
That's interesting. So there's a couple of ways to go with that from the student perspective. I can do a student perspective and then do real school perspective. Out of the responses to our surveys that we do with students, we found that only about 20% of students said that it made that mail or email from schools that they had never heard of before influence their decision on where to apply. And that's down from about 24% in 2014. So we're seeing a negative trend in the influence of direct mail. Now, with that said, if you go one step above that, we did ask about influence and recall. So recall, about 70% or so of students said they remembered getting mail or email from schools they'd never heard of before. But if you take a step back and think about that for a moment, who's not going to remember getting buckets of mail and tons of email from schools that they had never heard of before once they took a test? So that's not really the question. The question is influence on decisions. So 21% said that it impacted their decisions. And what's interesting is over half of students said that they threw away half or more of the mail that they received from schools without even reading it. On top of that, and there's a lot of data points to this, and I'd love to do a whole separate presentation on all this stuff. But on top of that, the higher you go up the achievement scale, so students with a 3.6 GPA or above, the groups that many institutions are trying to attract, increase the quality of their incoming class, what have you, the more mail they actually throw away without reading it. So there's something to be said about this traditional direct mail outreach to students that have never heard of you before when it's not done strategically in a high impact way. Students are getting bombarded with impersonal messaging, large volume, just things and brands they've never heard of before. That's why it's important to focus on the students with a demonstrated interest first, then invest your resources in pockets of new students. And one great example of this, and Michael, you sent me an article this morning about a school in Kansas that invested $2 million in a huge direct mail and email outreach campaign to get a 1% increase in enrollment over 2 years. Their goal was to go from like 15,000 students to 22, and they're still right around 15. So I think that the times of that approach are quickly going away into a more digital outreach strategy. I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Well, I think there's some discussion about that at the ACT conference, and it's really, to me, we're in a world now where students are empowered to do their own research, and they're doing much more of that research themselves, and less influenced by some of the things that we've done traditionally. So, in my view, one of the best things you can do is to really make sure your social media channels are really robust and have a lot of good content in them, because they actually are channels that students are using. You have that great slide that, and we'll share these the presentation that we did at ACT from the Higher Ed Live website, so you'll be able to download it if you haven't seen it. But there's a great slide in there with students who have their mail that they've gotten, all this print stuff that they've gotten from institutions, and just saying, what am I going to do about this? It's just going into the recycle bin, and it doesn't have any effect other than to make them say, I'm just going to throw this out. They don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, and all those pictures came from #CollegeMail on Twitter and Instagram, and it's crazy to see the piles that students do. There's a great video that's a couple years old now at this point of a student that kept every piece of mail that he received from a school and stacked it up in his room. Had like 90 pounds of mail in his room before it fell over, and he didn't even get all of it stacked up. So you think about that approach, and we didn't share this data, and Michael, I haven't shared this data with you, but our numbers at Chegg is we find that students limit their serious consideration set to really 5 to 8 schools, which isn't out of control. I feel like that's a good consideration set of schools. So, if you could focus on a student who you're in their top 8 versus focus on a student whose name was bought by 35 different colleges, where are your better odds as far as your outreach goes? And I think, the smaller competition pool means you have a better shot at converting those students.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you have a sec, after today, check out #CollegeMail, and we'll also, as Michael said, tweet out the slides to the presentation as well. So the next one, and not to pigpile on mail, or not to pigpile on print, I should say, but one of the next statements that was made was, teens regard print as a vital source of information about colleges. What did admissions officers believe?
91% said that print materials picked up at a college fair are important to teens before they apply.
That's pretty much everybody, right?
91% is pretty high.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thought, considering, and there's a few data points on this. We threw up this amazing slide that you came up with, your team came up with, that was basically OMG, LOL, and 24, I'm crying, I'm laughing so hard I'm crying emoticons. That's what students' responses are to questions like that. You think about the volume of materials that a student is receiving, the mail that they're getting, and then again, thinking back to the earlier data point on college fairs and their influence on really anything. I wrote about this in the Journal of College Admission a couple weeks ago. It was published, so feel free to check it out, and I'll tweet out that link as well. But is there something to be said? Oh, there it is. I'm in there somewhere, page 47 or something like that. But yep. Is there something to be said about the admissions roadrunner, and are they possibly going the way of the home doctor visit or the door-to-door salesman? I think that there is a place for travel and a place for admissions officers having a presence, meeting with counselors in the area, doing workshops, those sorts of things. But the tried and true, 4 high school visits a day and going to a college fair every night for 4 months at a time, and getting participating in hashtag admissions problems and that sort of stuff, I think are starting to really have cracks in the foundation of that because of the influence of these type of materials.
Mm-hmm. It's also important to say that the higher ability teens are getting more and more and more and more mail. They're the ones who are getting the 90 and 100 pounds of mail during admission season.
So is that why I barely got anything? Am I not one of the...
Sorry.
I went to college before the internet. No, I didn't.
Yeah, there you go.
I did go to college, though, when my online application was a downloadable PDF of the application. Like, that was the online application. So I am still in that bucket, I guess.
So we've got a couple of more points to talk about, Gil, that are relevant to the social media generation.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think the next one, and this is one that just comes out from Huffington Post, USA Today, every couple of months comes out with a new article about social media and teen trends, and the general statement or assumption is that Facebook is dead to teens. What did admissions officers say?
Less than a third believe that students use Facebook when deciding where to enroll.
That's crazy. So we go from everybody's got to be on Facebook, everybody's going to be on Facebook, to less than 1/3 believing that students even use it.
Right. Yep.
So interesting thought there. I feel like there's distinctions in use of the platform. So the teen perspective, in general, social media and Facebook specifically are influential still. 2/3 of students said that they use social media when deciding where to enroll. 67% of students use Facebook when researching colleges, and half used it to actively research colleges they've applied to. So one interesting chart that I'll be sure to tweet out afterwards as well is this our trends that we see from 2012 through 2014 currently of social media use for college information. And we know that over time that active use of social media of Facebook by students has declined. They're right around 82% right now of students said that they use Facebook for college information. They also, and there was a great article that was published a few months ago where a student essentially said that Facebook is like that awkward online family reunion that they just can't leave.
Right.
So they have a presence there. Facebook, I feel like, is a student's default online identity. You turn 13, you have a Facebook account. You might not use it that much, you might not log in all the time, but you have one. Just like when you graduate college, you get a LinkedIn account. You may not use it all the time, you may not go to it every day, but you have one. So
just like you have an email address.
Exactly, just like you have one. You might not check it, but you have one.
Yeah.
So we've seen a positive trend in student use of Facebook since 2012. In 2012, about 58% of students said that they use Facebook when researching colleges. That's up to 67%. So while their overall use has declined, the activity of using Facebook for college research specifically has increased. At the same time, so has every other social channel. So I feel like it's become a little more fragmented, right?
Right, exactly. Yep.
So the next one that is interesting, and this is kind of the tail end statement, and this more social again. Teens love it when you contact them on a social channel. What do admissions officers believe?
You'd think that because teens are active on social channels and they reach out to people on those channels, that they would welcome contact from someone representing a college or an admission officer. And in fact, 72% of admission professionals believe that students are open to being contacted through Facebook, and 71% believe that they're open to being contacted through Twitter.
Yes, so that's interesting, and again goes kind of back to our earlier point. Students are, but only if they contact you first. I think that's the important component, because if we go back to the earlier data point, only 4% of students prefer social media as an initial form of contact, but more than 75% say they're interested in talking to admissions on a social channel. So I think as a general rule, use the channel students use to contact you to reach them, right? If they text you, text them back. If they contact you with Facebook Messenger, contact them back. I think that's a good general rule of thumb, right?
That's right. And if they call you on the phone, heavens, old technology.
Yeah, call somebody, because
call somebody.
Call somebody else, because it probably isn't really happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are the key points. I think and I love your kind of wrap up thoughts. But my perspective as an admissions officer, I feel like there's definitely a lot of disconnect in what admissions officers believe and what students are saying. And I made the mistake of reading all the comments on the Chronicle of Higher Ed article about this presentation, and I had to delete a couple of my responses. But obviously there's always some disconnect in what people say in surveys versus their actual actions.
Sure.
But not to this disparity. I feel like there's something to be said about it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think this is about building awareness, and not assuming that because teens use a technology, they want to use that technology to communicate with you. So I think the texting is a good example of that. Yes, teens text. They text with their friends. They like apps where they can text with friends and nobody else can be part of those texts. But that doesn't mean that they want you to text them. So I think that it's becoming aware of the norms of communication within different channels, and then becoming aware of the norms of communication that your intended audience expects within those channels of communication, and just the awareness that teens are seeking more privacy in their use of social media, for example. That's a really important point for admission officers to take into account, for anybody to take into account.
Yep. Great. Well, every time we talk about this a little bit more, I learn something new, or I have another idea. So if anything, I got something out of today. Hopefully the internet did too. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today, and thank you, as always, to our live audience for tuning in. I'm Gil Rogers. Tune in next week, or tune in for more shows this week, including Student Affairs and Marketing Live. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Gil.